Imagine building a house to save your family from a storm, only to find that your new rules are causing everyone to run outside into the rain. This is the tragic reality facing the Catholic Church in Germany today. A few years ago, the German bishops launched the Synodal Way, a reform project intended to modernize the Church and stop the bleeding of members. Instead of a renewal, we see the most significant internal revolt since the Reformation. The very structures meant to save the institution now threaten to sever it from the global Catholic communion. This is not just a disagreement over policy or administration, it is a battle for the very soul of the Church in Europe and its relationship with the universal deposit of faith. Pope Francis famously remarked that Germany already has a great Protestant church and he does not want another one. His words capture the heart of this crisis, an attempt to update the substance of faith rather than its presentation. Today, I will show you what is happening in Germany and why Rome is responding with a specific long-term strategy. We will explore why every heresy in church history tells us how this story ends. Most importantly, we will see how the church remains the rock, even when the waves of controversy seem to be at their peak. The German bishops have proposed radical changes touching almost every aspect of Catholic life. They are pushing for the ordination of women, the blessing of same-sex unions, and a fundamental restructuring of how the Church is governed. They call this the Synodal Way, but it is a reform trap that has backfired. In 2025 alone, over 307,000 people formally left the Church in Germany. This process is called Kirchenaustritt, and it represents a legal and spiritual exit from the community. The irony is impossible to ignore. The more the German leadership tries to liberalize, the faster the people depart. While they argue these changes are necessary for survival, the actual evidence shows the opposite. Meanwhile, in Africa, where the Church remains deeply Orthodox, the number of faithful is exploding. This contrast raises a critical question about authority. Does a local group of bishops have the right to change the rules for everyone, or are they stepping outside the family house? Before we dive deeper into the historical patterns, I want to ask you to join our community at Totus Catholica. If you value deep theological analysis and want to stay informed about the future of our faith, please subscribe and click the notification bell. Your support helps us continue to provide a clear voice in these turbulent times. Now let's look at why this isn't a new story. History has a way of repeating itself, especially when it comes to ecclesial rebellion. To understand what is happening, we can look back to the book of Acts, chapter 15. When the early church in Antioch faced a local controversy, they did not decide the matter locally. They did not take a vote of the local believers. Instead, they went to the apostles in Jerusalem, seeking the authority of Peter. When Peter spoke, the matter was settled for the whole church. This biblical precedent established that essential matters of doctrine are not the property of one region or nation. The German Synodal Way is attempting the exact opposite by acting as if a local conference can unilaterally alter the church's sacramental and moral structures. In the 17th century, Gallicanism in France tried to assert similar local autonomy over the Pope. Later, the Synod of Pistoia in 1786 attempted to modernize teachings in a way that mirrored today's demands. In both cases, the Church responded firmly. Pope Pius VI condemned the errors of Pistoia in his bull Auctorem Fidei in 1794. He made it clear that the Church cannot be restructured according to the whims of a local assembly. Even in 1870, the Old Catholics rejected the definition of papal infallibility at the First Vatican Council. They thought they were the ones staying true to tradition, but today that group has shrunk to a tiny sect. A sobering parallel is seen in the Anglican Communion. When Western branches made unilateral decisions on moral issues, it led to a massive fracture with the global South. We see the same pattern playing out today within Catholicism. As the Catechism of the Catholic Church reminds us in paragraph 882, the Pope is the perpetual and visible source and foundation of unity. Without that center of gravity, the house cannot stand. So, how has Rome actually responded to this storm? Many feel the Vatican has been too quiet, but the full timeline from 2019 to 2026 shows a clear strategy. It began when the German bishops launched the Synodal Way, despite warnings about the risk of schism. By 2021, over 100 churches were openly blessing same-sex unions in defiance of a formal Vatican response. Pope Francis eventually addressed this in a letter published in Die Welt in November 2023. He warned that the German path was moving away from the universal church. The Vatican issued multiple formal warnings, including a statement in July 2022 and another in February 2024 that blocked a permanent synodal council. This council was the ultimate goal, a lay-led governing structure that would have no basis in canon law. While the majority of German bishops moved ahead, a brave minority stood their ground and refused to compromise on the essential unity of the faith. Cardinal Woelki of Cologne, along with bishops Hanke, Oster and Voderholzer, formally disassociated themselves from the synodal process and appealed to Rome for clarity. By May 2025, the internal rift within the German hierarchy was public and permanent, creating a clear choice for the faithful in the pews. In January 2026, Cardinal Woelki declared that for him, the Synodal Way was over, and he would focus instead on the spiritual renewal of his own diocese in union with the Universal Church. This was a pivotal moment because it showed that the German Church is not a monolith of dissent. There is a strong and faithful remnant that refuses to step outside the communion of the Universal Church, even under intense social and political pressure. Rome has quietly supported these bishops, recognizing them as the legitimate voices and the future of the Catholic faith in Germany. The global reaction has been just as powerful. Cardinal Ambongo and the bishops of Africa issued a strong counter-manifesto, making it clear the Global South would not follow Germany's lead. If you find this exploration of the Church's defense of truth meaningful, please consider sharing this video. Your shares help us reach people who may be confused by the headlines and searching for the deeper truth. Now, doesn't the Church need to change to better serve people? Proponents of the German Synodal Way argue the Church must adapt moral teachings on sexuality to prevent future abuse. They point to the MHG study as evidence that doctrine is somehow to blame. However, the reality is far more complex. Abuse is a failure of holiness and discipline, not a failure of the gospel itself. Regions that are most modernized do not find less abuse. They often find a deeper spiritual rot that leads to further decline. Then there is the claim that the Holy Spirit is speaking through the signs of the times or the majority opinion of a particular culture. They argue this is the Sensus Fidelium, or the sense of the faithful, which they believe should override traditional doctrine. But this is a fundamental misunderstanding, as the Sensus Fidelium is not a democratic poll of nominal Catholics or those who are no longer practicing the faith. It is the supernatural appreciation of divine truth among those who are in deep communion with the magisterium and the living tradition of the Church. The Holy Spirit cannot lead the Church to say that something is true today which was condemned as false by the apostles for 2,000 years. Truth is not an evolution of opinion. It is a person, Jesus Christ, who is the same yesterday, today, and forever. The sense of the faithful always points back to the center, which is the deposit of faith, rather than drifting away into current social trends. We often hear the word aggiornamento, which means updating. But as Pope John XXIII and Pope Benedict XVI clarified, this meant updating the way we present timeless truths, not changing the substance. If you change the ingredients of the medicine, it is no longer the same cure. Germany's attempt to rewrite the rules is not an update. It is an abandonment of the very thing that makes the Church a sign of contradiction to the world. If you are worried the Church is on the brink of collapse, remember that Rome plays the long game. We have seen this before. In the 1970s, a similar movement in the Netherlands, known as the Dutch Schism, seemed destined to create a separate entity. Pope John Paul II responded by slowly appointing Orthodox bishops who would gradually rebuild the local church. We are seeing this today. While the headlines focus on dissent, the seeds of the future German church are being planted by the Woelki minority. As the current generation of leadership retirement age, Rome will replace them with shepherds committed to the universal faith. It may take decades, but the Church thinks in centuries. The liberal experiment is proving to be a spiritual dead end, while the Orthodox path leads to growth and vitality. As we wrap up, I want to thank you for being part of this journey. If you would like to help us keep these videos coming, you can support us on Buy Me a Coffee platform through the link in the description or the QR code on screen. Your generosity allows us to dive deep into these critical issues and bring a perspective not found in mainstream media. Remember that the Church has survived emperors and revolutions. Germany's Synodal Way will eventually be part of that same history. The choice is clear, and it is one that every generation of Catholics has had to make in one way or another. We can follow the shifting shadows of secular culture and hope to find relevance there, or we can stand with the one who is the foundation of all reality. The Rock of Peter has weathered far greater storms than this, and it remains the only sure anchor in a world of constant change. Every heresy that ever challenged the integrity of this rock ended in the same place, the footnotes of history. Germany's Synodal Way will be no different, and the Church will emerge stronger and more unified when the dust finally settles. As we look to the future, we do so with hope, knowing that the truth of Christ can never be extinguished, no matter how strong the winds of change may blow.